Jason Clouse has always been involved with politics, and now he's running as a candidate for South Carolina House District 112. In this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I speak exclusively with Jason one-on-one. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. Jason Clouse.
Hey.
It's so good to meet you.
It's good to meet you too.
I appreciate this. So here we sit. You are a candidate for the South Carolina House of Representatives.
Right.
And tell me, why now?
Well, I've been involved actively in local politics for a while now, helping other campaigns and working on activism. I'm the chairman of the Low Country Republican Liberty Caucus.
Right.
And one of our goals is to recruit good candidates to run as Republicans, because not all the Republicans in the U.S. House or in the State House really adhere to the policies that you would think Republicans would adhere to, of freedom, liberty, free market economics. So we've been trying to recruit candidates. And I decided that if I'm going to ask other people to run, I should do it myself, since I couldn't find anyone to run in my district. But the reason I want to run against the incumbent is I don't feel like he's doing anything to really hold the establishment accountable. He's not a particularly bad guy, but he's just not very active in opposing the efforts of the lobbyists and the House leadership. And I think when you look at things like this bridge situation,
right,
infrastructure, schools, the SCANA situation with nuclear power plants, we've got a real mess. And the legislature is directly responsible for all of that, and they've been mismanaging it pretty badly. And it's been dominated by Republicans for quite a while, so there's really no excuse why we should have these many problems. So that's the main reason I'm running right there. I don't feel like our legislature is approaching this with the seriousness it requires, and I don't think my representative is doing a particularly good job of holding them accountable.
And you talk about those problems. Let me take you to this developing news.
Sure.
And this is the headline from the PostandCourier.com. Governor Henry McMaster calls for DOT audit answers at the I-526 bridge closure.
Right.
What more answers do you want from the SCTOD?
Well, it's not just the DOT.
Right.
The people that work at the DOT are good people.
Sure.
They're not trying to hide anything.
Right.
But it's more to do with the allocation of funds. A lot of this money gets diverted to the state infrastructure bank instead, and used for pet projects that benefit, friends and family of powerful legislators. And so the core problem is not necessarily that somebody at DOT is just a terrible person who's trying to hide something. It's so much as it is all the money is being diverted to places where it shouldn't be.
What are those places in your mind?
Florence County is one of the big destinations for money. Senator Hugh Leatherman has concrete companies that benefit from construction projects that don't even make any sense, like the Pamlico Highway. They spent over $100 million widening a 2-lane road to a 5-lane road. There's no traffic on it, or very little. So you have situations like that. There are other people who are well connected who make a lot of money, creating those blue signs that show you the restaurants.
Okay.
I think it was Hugh Leatherman's son-in-law was put on the Public Service Commission, and he made a lot of money from that. So you have a lot of that kind of stuff going on, and that's just inappropriate.
And let me take you to another headline from the PostandCourier.com. It reads this: state budget, that is, might arrive late, but there will be no South Carolina government shutdown.
Yeah.
If you were a state representative right now,
right,
what would you take in and what would you take out as far as the budget is concerned?
Well, I haven't thought too much about that, because I don't think the problem is so much that what we have in the budget. I think it's just the way the money is allocated. But here's what I'll say about the budget process. We have the longest legislative session of any state.
Right.
They spend 5 months, 3 days a week, but 5 months up there, and they can't pass a budget by this point. There's something seriously wrong there.
And you also talk about this on your website. You said this quote: South Carolina is a wonderful state, and its people deserve the best.
Right.
More freedom, more prosperity, and less intrusive government can be ours if we hold our elected officials accountable for the results of their actions. You ask this: why do we have the highest income tax in the South? Why are we last in education? Why do we continually pay more for electricity? Why do we have devastating corruption cases against our politicians? We haven't held our politicians accountable.
Right.
So let me ask you those questions again.
Sure. Right.
Why do we have the highest income tax in the South?
It's a good question, because the Republicans always talk about how they want lower taxes. But we do have the highest tax rates in the Southeast. We're a red state. We vote for Republicans all the time at the federal level, who also claim to want low taxes. But we just keep pouring money into the government's coffers. And I think it all goes back to corruption, ultimately. That's the biggest problem we have, because that money keeps being misspent, really. And, then they always want more. Like this gas tax they just increased.
Right.
If they were really doing a great job of maintaining the roads, and they were doing it efficiently, and they said, you know what, we got a lot of people moving here, it's going to cost more, we need to raise taxes a little bit, I think most people would say, okay, that's fair enough, that makes sense. But they're doing a lousy job. And so for them to come out asking for more money is kind of an insult. I think that government is inherently corrupt. I prefer that the private sector do everything if possible. But since that's not going to happen, we should at least try to hold them to some level of spending.
And you talk about spending. Let me take you to education.
Right.
Where are we with that discussion right now?
Well, we're 23rd in the nation in spending. So we spend about $13,000 per student, or a little more, but only about $6,000 of it actually makes it to the classroom. And so much of it goes to administrative costs. And there's a lot more administrative overhead than there used to be. You can find charts online about how much the administrative costs have gone up. Right. And that's just the kind of, whenever you have a government agency, they love to pad their budget, hire a whole bunch of people, whether they really need them or not. And I know some teachers who have told me that just the horrors of the system is just completely messed up. Teacher pay is very low. There's a lot of disillusionment among teachers. And they've recently, I'm not sure where they are on this, they removed the Terry program, which lets retired teachers go back in.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's causing a lot of problems because you have experienced teachers now who aren't really incentivized to go back into the system.
And let me take you also to another question that you posed to your voters.
Right.
Why do we have devastating corruption cases against our politicians? What's that one word to describe ethics in Colombia?
Yeah. Well, I think the problem you have here really mostly is that the voters don't know what's going on.
Okay.
They're not aware of it. I think if they were, they'd be furious. But if you flip on, say, CNN or Fox News, all you're going to see is what the president's doing in Congress. You're not going to find out what your state or local government's doing. And so, as I speak to people, I find that I think they're mostly reasonable people, the voters. They just don't know all this stuff's happening. They may have heard something about the Quins or something like that, but they don't really know a whole lot about just how completely messed up it is. So I think that educating the public is the biggest way to stop corruption.
And you talk about what's going on in the district. What is going on in the district? Because you cover what, Mount Pleasant, Upper Palm, Southern Island?
Upper Mount Pleasant,
right.
So where all the growth is right now.
Right.
And that district it's changed so much just in the last 5 to 10 years. And I don't think our representative has really done a great job of staying in touch with the changes. I know a lot of people are upset about the changes,
Sure.
which I'm sympathetic to. The traffic is terrible. It's even worse at the moment, everything that's going on. But a lot of that falls more on county and city government failing to plan correctly. But I do think there's part of the problem there is at the state level. There's a big push for what they call economic development.
Right.
And that's something that sounds good. Oh, economic development, people getting richer, good things happening, sounds good. But what it really translates into is special favors for large out-of-state corporations that move here. So Boeing, Volvo, BMW, places like that. And those places are fine. I'm glad they're here. But they keep pushing to move business in, and those people, they bring in a lot of people to live here.
Right.
And you can only, especially in a place like Mount Pleasant, we're so constrained by water, there's only so much you can build. So, all the traffic kind of has to funnel through 17 at some point, and it's difficult to get around that. But I think that they don't care because they're just trying to get businesses to move here. And I think that's short-sighted. I mean, if a business wants to move here, fine, but we shouldn't be giving them a lot of tax breaks that we're not giving those small local businesses. It's not fair to them, and it really distorts the economic trends.
Describe to me the following one word: plastic bags.
I think the plastic bag ban is silly, and I didn't support it. But I also oppose the state disallowing municipal governments from banning them, because I think as much as possible, we need to bring governance back to the local level. And if Mount Pleasant wants to ban plastic bags, I disagree with that decision, but it's their decision, not the state's decision. So I'm very much for home rule.
Offshore drilling in one word.
In one word? That's difficult. So we have a lot of natural coastline to protect.
Right.
And as we saw with instances like the BP oil spill,
Right.
there's a lot of risks there. Now, traditionally, before the middle of the 19th century, tort was used to protect the environment, and it actually worked pretty well. If somebody blew smoke onto your property, you could sue them, or if they contaminated the water that ran across your property, you could sue them. It was very easy to sue people back then, very cheap, and it really worked very effectively to cut down on pollution. So property rights are really the key to protecting the environment. It's the only way that works because there's an economic incentive there. The problem is that nobody owns the ocean, so the government kind of takes the role of protector there. So as much as I think that there's a better way of doing it by privatizing waterways and letting people own and protect them,
Right.
I do believe that since the government is currently filling that role, that there has to be some environmental protections there. Now, I'm not an expert on drilling, and I'm sure there's ways to do it safely, and I think that there's a lot of hype with it. You saw that with fracking, so talking about their water being lit on fire, that
Right.
kind of thing. Turns out that that happens all over the place for all kinds of reasons, and doesn't necessarily have anything to do with fracking. So there's a lot of propaganda and hype on both sides. So I think you just make a reasonable effort to watch what's going on. But I'm not completely opposed to offshore drilling.
Firearms in one word.
We have a basic human right to defend ourselves. And that's enshrined both in the Constitution and in our state constitution. Article 1, Section 20 guarantees the right of every citizen to defend themselves with firearms. Now, I don't think there's not a lot of gun violence in Mount Pleasant, not a lot of break-ins and things like that there, but people still have the right to own and defend themselves with firearms.
And one word describe your campaign right now. We're 3 weeks out before your Republican
Right.
primary.
I'm knocking on doors and talking to a lot of people, and I'm finding them very receptive to the message that we need to rein in Columbia and hold them accountable.
When you peel back your political feeling, who is Jason Clouse?
I care about the individual.
Okay.
And I think you can see businesses sometimes trample on the individual, but it's kind of easy to fight back against them because you can just not use their services, right? If they do a bad job, if they don't give you good service. Government tramples on the individual all the time, and there's no real recourse. You have to use their courts if you want to go after the government, and they're likely to win those cases. So it's very hard to fight the government if they've done something wrong. So I see there's a lot of oppression of the individual coming down from the state.
Jason Clouse, thank you so much for your time. I really,
Thank
really
you.
appreciate this.
Enjoyed it.
Likewise.
Thanks.
Thank you.